Hi. So that was awesome. I actually just did a bunch of the talk here. Hold on. Let's get back to this. I was starting to stream without hitting the go live button in YouTube. So this is my first time doing a stream by myself. I'm sorry I was late. I went through this whole thing and then realized that I wasn't live at all. I was like, wow, it's very strange here. So I'm going to start from here and just tell everyone this is kind of, I wanted to talk about the hold on. I'm getting used to this YouTube live because I've done everything in StreamYard before, and now I'm actually using OBS and YouTube directly, and I'm just kind of curious like what I'm doing wrong. So if you're here and you can and you're watching, please send me a chat at some point. But anyway, and this is super casual. I'm actually just eating gummy bears, having fun here. So let me know if you have questions, either here or on Twitter. I just wanted to walk through the content itself as well as some things I did to make it. I learned a lot doing this talk and thought I'd share it because one of my goals for this talk was actually inspiring other people on doing a talk that's different and hopefully learning from some things that I did right or wrong during this. I thought would be interesting for people just to kind of pick up on and see tools and kind of what to do. So I'm going to go over the actual talk content first and then go into workflow after. So we'll start here with the actual trailer for the movie. I made the trailer 2 weeks or 3 weeks after the talk was actually fully edited and submitted to Kubecon, because the talk was due about a month before Kubecon happened, and I knew I wanted the trailer to come out basically the week of Kubecon, just because it's, timing wise, you want people to know it's coming out. So I had some time in between making the talk and editing it and submitting it and then finally making the trailer. So I essentially just took bits and pieces of the talk itself and cut it up into this trailer. I don't have any sound for it because I couldn't figure out how to route OBS sound into this. So I hope you all can hear me now. I just have my mic as one of my sources, but this is the first time I've ever streamed with OBS before. So yeah, if you can't hear me, please chat. Or if you can hear me, let me know. So let's just look at the trailer real fast and I'll talk about it. I actually wanted that first scene to be a lot more splashy, but the animation, I slowed it down a lot in the trailer, and I don't think I did enough. These titles, I spent probably half a day looking for titles for a movie and templates, and I was using DaVinci Resolve, which I'll show off in just a little bit, for all of my editing, and it works really well. And there's a lot of templates around like movie trailer titles and stuff, but the legality of using some of those I wasn't too sure about, especially for something that, it's ending up on YouTube, but I didn't know, some of them required attribution, some of them required other licenses. So I found out that DaVinci Resolve had a bunch of built-in titles, and so I really just took almost every single one of the DaVinci Resolve titles and spliced them throughout this because I thought it was kind of funny. Usually trailers stick to like one title style, but I just wanted to be kind of silly with it. So I put as many in it as possible. And the music for it, actually, I pulled from YouTube. Has a lot of free, attribute-free music, sound effects, different libraries that you can use. So I was able to pull in from YouTube a bunch of their music, and I went through tons and tons of music and finally settled on this one. I originally wanted something that was more like an action-y movie, and then I thought, oh, maybe I'll make it like more of a silly comedy, and then I kind of settled on this, which was kind of like in between, kind of like a spy and action soundtrack. So it kind of fit, and it after listening to music for a couple hours, I was like, okay, I just need to pick one and kind of go with it. So that's where I ended up. I just, I had to figure out how to make these titles in DaVinci Resolve. They're really easy. You basically select it and then put in your text and then like center it or put it on the picture wherever you want, and then how long you want it to play. There was a lot of other things you can do that are super advanced, and I had no idea what I was doing with that. So maybe next time I'll spend some more time on it. But I was able to make the trailer once I had all the components of it, knew where the titles were, had music for it, and all my clips. I made it in probably 3 hours of editing pieces together and putting it in the order I wanted. So yeah, like I said earlier, I just pulled out clips of things that I already had available. So I just, literally copy and pasted from the talk and shoved it in there, and sometimes, edited length and stuff like that. I'll talk about how I made a couple of these things in a little bit. Again, random, silly trailer or title that I just like, hey, that one looks funny, put it in. I obviously wanted to show off the animation. Because that was like a big part of that took the longest of anything in this talk was the animation itself. So I wanted to really show that as like, hey, this is a different talk, and get people a little bit excited about it. This scene here, I cut it from the final talk. There was not a lot, but there was a couple big pieces that I pulled out from the final talk because of time constraints, where the original talk was about 42 minutes or 43 minutes long. And so I pulled out a couple different scenes, one small animation, which I'll show you here in a second, and then this scene, which was mostly about taking for streaming a movie, taking the film itself and cutting it up into little bits and then reassembling that at the clients. And I wanted to show that as like, okay, there's a lot of reasons you have to do this. And I was like piecing together all the little bits in the talk and making it seem more difficult than it actually is for a computer to do, but also the importance of having a playlist service that automatically has all these pieces together. So but yeah, I recorded that bit as well as another animation here in a second. They didn't make it into the talk. This was the animation where I talk about the different players, their different capabilities, why it matters to have a lot of different formats for a video. And so these, it kind of just kept growing and growing to be, some of these will be HDR, some of these will be Atmos sound, some of them will be whatever. And you take all those, wrap individual pieces up in DRM, throw it into a playlist, and then put all of that in the buckets. And then each client had to know which playlist and which thing they had to fetch. So it was originally part of the talk to show the importance of media management and the playlist service that we talk about later in the actual talk, but neither one of them had time in the final talk. This was just, pieces that I just thought were either interesting or people might find interesting about the talk. I mean, me standing in front of the camera or sitting at my desk were the least interesting bits, in my opinion. So I, visually appealing. Whoops, now we're buffering. There it is. I'll talk about a couple of these scenes more because I'll go over the actual talk. I put random quotes because it seemed like the thing you do for trailers. So I just wanted to have something, again, the trailer was mostly funny, silly thing to do. And I just wanted to show off kind of like what kind of set the mood for the talk in general, where it is serious, like there was real content, but also like I liked having fun with it. So yeah, again, this is just, I had it filmed. I had a couple different pieces that I either didn't use. I had a whole segment of me basically like driving to the theater. Just never used it, and there was just random footage that I had, and none of it was like great. It was just I didn't know how long the talk was actually going to be because the animations and the overlay, the audio overlay for the narration was the most it was more than half the talk. So until I had all the animations done, I didn't know which pieces I actually needed to live stream or not, or live talk about in front of the camera. So I had a bunch of filler that I was adding in there for various reasons and never really used. So we'll jump right into the main talk itself, and I'm just gonna like let it play and talk over some of the things that came up, or interesting tidbits about it. And then after the talk, I'll actually show workflow and tools I used for anyone that wants to do something similar. This shot was one of the ones my son helped me with. He was very excited to help me. He loves making small movies, and so when I was like, actually, I'm gonna make a talk, I need your help. Let's go ahead and try this thing. So, you know, this is the very first thing that I filmed. If you didn't notice, my hair is super long here, and let me just turn that down. And I had a much bigger beard. I filmed this scene first, which is nice that it's at the beginning of the talk, but the rest of the talk is kind of the furthest back. So when it goes 2 weeks earlier was actually the last thing I filmed. The tattoo on my forearm, I actually Sharpied that on my arm the first time, trying to make it look more like a tattoo, but realizing that you'd never be able to scan it. It bled too much between things, and it just never came out right. So I had some Sharpie under that taped on piece of paper there. So, and I knew from the starting I wanted to factor in haircut, beard as part of the like showing time progress. It was just like a silly thing to do. So yeah, like I said, this was the last bits of scene that I filmed in the first part of the timeline. So, and there's also foreshadowing. If you didn't, I have the actual talks that the movie I made was based on Chicken Wing song, which is a TikTok song. I'm singing it there as kind of foreshadowing for what I was making, because I already knew the actual video that I was making for the website. And again, this is I think this part my son helped me with this, as well as a couple other bits where whenever the camera's moving or panning, obviously I couldn't do it myself, and I'll show a couple of those things in just here a little bit. I'll just let it'll get there in a second. Right. This next scene was actually a little more difficult than I thought it would be, just to kind of get the iPad centered on what I was showing essentially. But this was just a static shot, so it was easy enough to kind of set the camera there, and I had to do a couple takes of like where my hand was versus the camera and how it actually centered. But it's all just set up for the actual animation, and I'll go over those in just a little bit too. Jump ahead. This was again easy static shots. I kept having to redo it because laptops were out of frame, and those are actually the piece of paper where the actual storyboard I used for this talk. I storyboarded the whole thing ahead of time, and so just so I can visually see it, because that's how I'm a learner visually. I like to explain things visually, and so I'm just kind of used to that workflow. So I had a storyboard of all these different animations and scenes, and I didn't reorder them as much as some people do, but I definitely cut some out of like, that doesn't make sense. And this, somewhat simple explanation of why how rendering's hard or different than web services, and where like computers and technology kind of fit into that with cloud native stuff and what we're kind of used to in Kubernetes and that sort of ecosystem. My son let me borrow his bear because it had the most clothes, and that was kind of how I had a couple different ideas on how I wanted to show like re-rendering something, because it does happen pretty often where it's like, hey, we need to change how this looks, or this character has a big update or something. So re-rendering components is somewhat common, and I just wanted to show like how that applies, because it is a 3D model, and it is having a physical object is an easy way to show that. And my editing skills were terrible with the switches, so I was just randomly like, hold my hand still, let me try to do this, okay, let me change the clothes and try as much as possible. But it works. It was one of the first gimmicks. Well, no, I guess it was one of the first gimmicks that I edited, for sure, because there was other things that I shot, but I was getting used to DaVinci Resolve. I didn't actually. I'll talk about it in the tools in just a second. skip a little bit ahead here because this is all just explanation. I think next we go outside, right? Yeah. And I added some dialogue here because of cutting out another scene, I had an animation I was going to do about scheduling and scheduling render jobs specifically and order and how you do kind of a DAG for for frames where like this needs to come first and this component needs to come first and how some of that works. I wanted to add that in here and I didn't. So I kind of just threw in like, hey, we can use an off-the-shelf renderer for small things, but we'll need something custom if we're doing a lot at a time. And I have multiple boxes of those hard drives. I think I had 4 boxes in the garage. I need to get rid of them at some points, but it takes a lot of storage to make a movie, so I was kind of showing off just in general how much visually that looks like when you're like, I need a petabyte of storage for this movie. It turns out it's a lot of discs, especially if you need it to be high performance or locally available for artists. This next scene I added kind of late in the filming process. I realized I needed some sort of like, from here let's make the movie, and so it was just kind of like, well, what do I do? And at first I was just like, I just want to make montage, but I didn't know what to do for the montage. I was just going to film my desk or something, and then the idea came to me of, oh, you know, it'd be funny is the Aha, you know, music video where he's stuck in a drawing. And so like this, again, foreshadowing for the video I was actually going to make. That was an old drawing that I had. And in this piece I was just like, oh, like, wouldn't it be cool if I could do something where I did like an overlay art and like it came to life sort of thing. I'll show how I did it in the app itself. But it was like a fun after thing that I was like, oh, I wonder if I could do this. And sure enough, it worked really well. One of my coworkers pointed out that me laying down is very reminiscent of Tron, which it wasn't intentional at first, but I thought it was also kind of funny because the Aha and then Tron and this next piece where I'm going to the car, you know, I have I'll Be Back, so it's, you know, Terminator, and so I was trying to add these little bits of like other movies for things. You can actually see it pretty good in this. I always had a lapel mic on me, and it has great audio. The very first scene, I don't have it because it was the first thing I recorded. I didn't realize how bad the audio would be coming from recording on my phone, and so I had to redub the entire first scene. I totally forgot I did that. But like if you listen to the sigh that I have at the beginning, it's completely off for what my mouth is doing, and so I just tried to say what I was saying in that and line it up as perfectly as possible. But I don't think it's super noticeable, but I notice it for sure. And so it's just kind of funny. Every other scene I have the lapel on for better audio, but the very first scene I didn't know I would need it. And once I tried to edit it, and I was like, oh, I can't hear myself at all. It was like all wind and background noise and people hammering from like a mile away. I pulled this out, obviously, of a ring that I was just like, oh, well, it might be fun to have like some different camera shots. These little bits, I just spent an hour or so like randomly running around my backyard, and I drove to a couple other places for the montage for and the sound effect there where I threw the mask on my face. I discovered that DaVinci Resolve had sound effects, and so I just thought that one was super funny. Like I was playing with different things. I wanted to add sound effects other places, and I just never did. So it's just like, oh, well, this one worked, whatever. And so I threw it in there. This scene, my old coworker from Disney, Patrick, lives somewhat near to me, and he has a drone. I didn't actually have one, and so I asked him if he would be willing to help me out at lunch sometime. And so it was really fun. You know, we just packed up and went to a local theater, and the first one we went to had a different front. It was kind of more of a grand theater front, but it was too close to an airport, so he couldn't actually fly, which was surprising. I didn't realize that was how close we were to the airport. But sure enough, we looked like, okay, what's the next closest theater that actually looks like a theater? Because some of them just kind of look like blank buildings or boxes or something. So thankfully he helped me out and drove over with me, and we got this. It took a few shots to get he was panning and flying, and so it was a few different runs, but it was fun. It was like I wanted to add that as like originally it was going to be like a Shawshank Redemption style, and even I debated, well, where'd it go? You can see right here on the right over here is a fountain that is usually on, and I actually debated, like, if the fountain was on, I was gonna like go into it and like have it pan up like it was raining on me, and like zoom in close so it looked like it was just raining, and then zoom out and you'd see I was just standing in a fountain, but it was off, so we just did it this other way, which also worked. This is by far my favorite scene to film. I just went and got In-N-Out for lunch one day, and I sat out in my car, and again, actually this was another one I missed the lapel on this one because I didn't bring it with me when I went to go to lunch, and I didn't want to go back in the house because my youngest was sleeping. I didn't want to make noise and all this stuff, so I was like, I'm in a car, if the window's up, cars are pretty good sound boxes, so that one worked out okay. I did have a couple different takes though, because I did this by myself. I just strapped the phone to the headrest with a flexible tripod, and so there's another shot where it's a little off, like it points up a little bit higher and stuff, and I had a couple different lines because I said the whole thing twice. I didn't have scripts, I was just kind of making it up from what I knew I wanted to put in there, and so I said the whole thing twice, but I liked this part right here. It was the second take. So the camera moved, but I liked what I said here at the end better than what I said at the beginning. So, or the first time. So yeah, it was animal fries, a double and a chocolate shake. So it was good. And I had extra footage from me basically finishing my meal and saying and talking about it. I was gonna put it in the credits, and again, I just kind of ran out of time. This one was fun. Again, a pan shot, so my son helped me with it, and I actually have, this was our setup, which was just a funny little shopping cart that we got a tripod on and put the camera into. So yeah, everything, I shot everything on my phone, and I'll show you the workflow in a second, but he just kind of held the tripod and pushed the cart forward, and I had a little like mark on the ground where he would stop, and then, oops. The rest of it kind of just was static once I got the pan in there. Again, this is all animation from here. This was obviously the longer of the two animations, explaining the streaming infrastructure, which I felt like in general was more interesting in some regards. You can notice here my beard is longer. My hair was the same, but this was actually like a week and a half after filming the first scenes, so I had a little more facial hair. The end here I just drew on in a different app because I didn't actually have the animation done. So I was still, even after filming these, I was still working on the animation bits because those just took forever to kind of do. So I just was like, I'm just going to put the end at the end because I'll make sure I put that at the end of the animation somehow. So the actual like end here in the animation, you'll see like doesn't do that. There it is. I added this last scene. I was like, yeah, that's the end, right? You can see they totally don't match up. But I was like, I needed to figure out something to make it some congruent from one to the other. I actually talk about details of the infrastructure very limited because I wanted to make it kind of generic. You can see EKS control as like I was from here. this montage was a lot quicker because, again, I was out of time. I didn't really know how to end the talk outside of like, okay, it's done. So I just wanted to show off those, again, my storyboards. This was a Docker container called Hollywood, which just does like a random tmux setup with a bunch of flashy looking things. So you can just run Docker with -t. I forget who it's by, but it's called Hollywood. So I kind of threw that in there. It automatically shifts for you and does all this funny things. So I thought about doing some other interesting stuff here, but again, this was like not that, it was a different aspect of the infrastructure. So I was kind of like, okay, well, let's just figure out how to transition from that into we're done. And again, the music came from the YouTube library. I threw all these Dr. Pepper cans around as like, I had a box over here as just like showing time. I didn't really know how else to show that because for me it was kind of like, okay, that works. A blank VS Code. We did this shot a few different times. I wanted to actually clear off the entire desk and just have a laptop and show like a very empty desk with a laptop as like minimalistic, but I never had time to destroy my desk for an afternoon for one shot. So I was hoping also this QR code would be scannable by a phone, and both QR codes, when I tried to scan them later, I couldn't do it. Locally, when I was doing the video, it was fine, but for some reason, once it was on YouTube, I never got them to scan properly. So whatever. More music from YouTube library, and DaVinci Resolve has credits built into it, so I just kind of use those as like, hey, just type what you want and then just add more spaces to fill it out. I'll show off Justin Plus real fast too. Go on. There it is. This was based on this. I made Justin Plus based on this template that someone else had made and put up on GitHub, which I thought was rather interesting. Is this the right one? No, that's not the right one. Oh, maybe it is. It looks different. Oh, this one. So he has they have a demo of their, I guess it's down. They had a demo of what they used. I'm not a JavaScript developer, and so a lot of these technologies that they use, I know a few of those, but didn't know most of them, and so I basically cloned it or forked it, and then just like started deleting things. So it's just like, I don't need this, I don't need that, I don't need that. Their clone is really complete. I don't know what. I guess they took it down. It has a lot of stuff in it that look like the older Netflix style, but with like login buttons and profiles and all this stuff. None of it actually like does things, but the UI functions really well. So for me, like, I took out that there was a top banner with profiles and all this stuff, and they had multiple different of these carousels for different genres of films and stuff, and it all actually pulled information from the movie database, TMDB, whatever it's called, not IMDb. There's an open standard one with an API. So they just randomly would grab a bunch of movies. I was like, I don't need any of that stuff. So I just basically took one carousel and this banner piece on top, and as much as possible made it work. And I hard coded a big JSON blob of what movies I wanted on the carousel, threw in some pictures, and I deployed it on Amplify. So it's on AWS Amplify for the front end, and then all of these obviously bounce out to just YouTube. I wanted them to be embedded players, like actually like show up on the main page and not go somewhere else, and I didn't have time to figure it out. So whoops, it's still playing. So yeah, this was essentially, all the JavaScript was tacked together of someone else's example. There was even pieces in here that were really confusing to make work. Some of it I even left, like I tried to get runtimes right and release dates, but like the rating they had hard coded in there from something else. And I wanted to add buttons for like a trailer and behind the scenes, and I never got to it. So I actually want to expand on this a little bit more and learn some more React using it eventually. But for now, I just had these essentially 5 videos, was the 2 animations and then the 2 Thanksgiving movies I made, and then the actual talk. And the turkey leg talk actually came to me first, as far as from Chicken Wing, the idea of it at least, but not the lyrics. So my son and wife helped me figure out lyrics, and then I was like, okay, well, I think I can do that. And throwing rolls at Larry rhymed with, dairy and the other things. So sure, that works. So those were all. Oh, and this one, if you're not used to the M to the P's, M to the B they're both TikTok songs, and this one was actually, I'm blanking on her name. Porch is her last name. Bella Porch is the most liked TikTok video of her singing M to the B, and so I was able to import that video and trace over it with the animation software I was using, and just kind of like as much as possible, just kind of did like a loose, what it looked like. And there's even like pieces in here that completely, like I miss her neck or something, but it's all usually single frame, so you don't notice it too much. And then I just added random P's. I found the song track that they were using without the lyrics, and it worked. And the turkey leg, M to the P's and turkey leg, my wife sang, and I kind of edited it in there. So big shout out to her for giving me those. If anyone has questions, send it in chat. Otherwise, I'm going to jump into the actual like workflow of how I was doing things. And for that, I'm actually going to show it off over here. Just diagram it real fast. Essentially, I had my camera, or my phone, which was doing all of the recording. I had my, well, that's a terrible square. My NAS, my local network storage, and it's a Synology, so I use the Drive app, and Drive lets you pretty easily just like shove files into a shared folder essentially. And so I took all the videos as I was recording them, I'd put them in the network storage, and then I used SyncThing to push that to my laptop and a cloud instance I was using for editing, because I spent a good 2 days trying to get some open source editing software to work, PyTV and OpenShots, and in both cases they had limitations for what I wanted to do, or crashed a lot on my system. So I then went to DaVinci Resolve, which requires NVIDIA video cards, which my laptop doesn't have, and I don't have a desktop, so I couldn't add one to anything. I went as far down the route of looking for external, Thunderbolts video cards that I could add to my laptop, and then I realized that Amazon Workspaces has GPU-based workstations that you can use, and so I spun one up in my accounts and was able to actually install. It's Windows-based, but I installed DaVinci Resolve there, and then was able to get SyncThing to actually give me this cross sync. So essentially, whenever I would add things from my phone, I would wait for it to sync to my laptop first, so I could rename and organize it, because editing the files locally on my laptop was way easier than doing it through either the NAS web interface or from my phone. So I could do all of my naming stuff here, which would then get replicated into both places, so that all the file structures in all 3 areas worked. And so from that point, I could switch over to the cloud instance, which is, I have it up here. This is just the SyncThing interface, which essentially gives me like where my folder is and the clients that I have connected to it. And then DaVinci Resolve just has all of the actual, videos here. So this is my trailer, and this is the Kubecon talk. DaVinci Resolve would, pull it up as it's local files here once it's synced. And so I'd have to, in DaVinci, keep refreshing the media to pull it in whenever I pulled in new assets. But it was pretty straightforward once I got to that point. It should load here in a second. And everything I did in DaVinci Resolve, I basically learned for this. I had never used it before. I had known about it. I had known other places and studios that had used it, but I had never done it myself. So it was a lot of learning. There was a lot of amazing, quick tutorials on YouTube and other sites that'll teach you how to do, fades and layering and stuff like that. But essentially, I spend the whole time doing my edits, and I didn't even mess mostly with like Fairlight is their audio, color is for actual like kind of effects and things, and Fusion has this whole like workflow stuff that I don't understand at all. But it was super nice to have this all in a cloud instance and fast enough remote. Like I can play the audio from this. I did all of my editing this with audio and never even noticed like a lag for it. And it's like a 16 core with GPU sort of instance, so I didn't even need to worry about like my laptop dying or heating up or all this stuff. So it was nice just to have as a system that worked for me. I was quite impressed with how well it worked remotely. Most of the editing is pretty straightforward as far as like I dragged in clips. One thing I did learn was it's much easier to do some things from the animation software, which I'll show in just a second, do it in post rather than doing it on the iPad itself. Some things that got like semi-complicated for me at least was like this montage here where I had multiple layers with cuts trying to figure out like where the video fit in, and doing those small cuts was hard for me just to figure out. And then the second animation, this is the streaming animation. A lot of these I basically watched the animation while I recorded the audio, and then later matched the animation to what I was saying. And so I would just pause it locally while I was like explaining something to get how long that section should be because of what I wanted to say. And then in here, in post, I basically, all these little cuts are like me extending different portions of it to say like, oh, that needs to be a second longer. And so I could freeze frame, drag it out a second, freeze frame, drag it out a second. And so a lot of these cuts I did that way. Whereas if you look at the very first animation here, it's literally almost all one piece because I did all of the timing for it in the iPad, which turned out to be way harder to do just because the software isn't really designed to handle something that's 10 or 14 minutes long. So I did, these sorts of cuts. Like I extended this in freeze frame and then because of the audio that I had. And so once I realized that it's so much easier to do in DaVinci Resolve, I like the whole back half of the other animation is all chopped together with freeze frames and cuts because all of that was so much more difficult to do in the software itself. Like this this was very difficult to get these heartbeats to line up with my with the audio track that I recorded. There's dozens of these little like tiny little cuts of extend this piece, and some of it I was learning again as I went. I didn't know how to do a freeze frame, so I was like copy and pasting a couple times, and then I was like, oh, there's got to be a better way. So figuring that out over and over again was took a long time. The entire editing for the talk was probably, I don't know, in total maybe 4 days of actual like editing with the music and everything else. Took me a long time to learn it, including time that I wasted with other software. So it was not super fun. Let me show off wherever the animation software went. Here it is. Here's the iPad. all of the animations I did in this app called Flip a Clip, which is a fantastic tool. It's super simple to do a lot of really cool things. You can see like my son loves it. He does all these fun drawings and animations himself. I did them all at 12 frames per second because you are drawing all of these frames, and films are usually 24, but I'm not drawing double the amount. So I can show off like this clip here, which is me going into the computer. You get just the frame by frame view down here at the bottom. You can add music and stuff. I never did in here. It was always easier to do inside of DaVinci. But basically you can import a video. So I said, okay, well, let me just, from here, add video, and it just pulls out the frames, and then you just add a layer and draw over it. So you can see here, I have like my video frame at the bottom and then a couple layers on top. And so if we get into like this, you can see, like layer 1 and layer 4, like I started like making it more visible by just, they were all 100% opacity, but making it more solid on the background. So I was just kind of like messing around with it. This was the first time I had ever drawn on top of another video. So I was just kind of playing with it. And as you see, like I started just making the bottom layer here the screen essentially, and making that more solid. And then this top layer was the turkey itself. But it's pretty easy here. Once you had something that didn't move, to essentially just copy and paste layers, that was way easier than, I didn't draw it every time, otherwise you'd see it move. So I could just take a layer, copy it, paste it to the next, and just kind of move through. It was easy to do, but it took a lot of, it's like 5 clicks. And so doing 5 clicks when it sits there for 10 seconds, times 12, 120 times I had to do those 5 clicks over and over again. So it was fine. You can also speed up. Let's get, actually it's probably there more than 10 seconds. So, whoops, no, iPad, don't go over. Where'd you go? Oh, iPad, you're dumb. It also gives you this onion, which is what it's called, for seeing frames before and after. So I could see like what the movement was going to be in the frame by frame. It's pretty easy to do when you're drawing over a video, because if I like take this, drop that down, I essentially went through and I traced myself, or all the like major outline pieces, and then I just added a background that I kind of scribbled in. In the background, I scribbled in pretty quickly so that it wasn't consistent every time. It changes frame by frame. It made it look more hand-drawn, similar to the AHA video. But essentially, that's all I did, is I traced myself, including things that looked really weird, like blurs, and like my face there is like so distorted because of the motion blur. So in some cases I added these motion lines at the end, or like added the shadow there. But essentially, like, that's kind of how you do animation, is you have to figure out how things deform and make, that's how they look more realistic for film. So that's kind of what I was doing here, was just making it look as accurate to what the camera captured as possible. And again, this was just a fun, like, I just kind of threw it in there as like, oh, I should have some sort of transition in here. So I just recorded that in my hallway and did it. I did make the how to make an animated film first. The way that this is, I don't know how many frames, let's see. It's 3,279 frames, and this is the shorter of the two videos. It's 4 minutes in here. After edits in DaVinci, it's closer to, I think it's like 8 or 9 minutes. So there's a bit that did get extended, but again, it's just so much easier to do in DaVinci. Basically, the only thing that I found that was easy enough to kind of do timing was this frames viewer they have, where it basically gives you all of the frames in this grid, and you can select one or select multiple, but you have to go through it. So if I do 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, select 12 of them, that's a second. And so I could take this, I can copy and paste it over and over again. And so it's like, hey, if I need 30 seconds, I had to select this, copy paste, or I would select 24 and do it 15 times or whatever. And so that's how I was getting my timing the first time for this animation, because it was just I had to figure out a way to make that my audio line up. Once I figured out how easy it was in DaVinci Resolve to literally just like drag a little slider over to say like make this 5 seconds. I was like, oh, it was so much easier there. But I spent a lot of time in here just trying to get that timing right. The animations themselves, like the drawings, are pretty basic. I mean, I just like freehanded most of it. Where's like this? Like they have some guides in here if you use the pen. You can draw whatever. They have these shapes here that you can do. So like this line lets you like do solid, like lines, fill it in. You can make your pen super thick and kind of do. So I was using the tools as needed, and I was just kind of like casually drawing these at night and stuff whenever I wanted to, because it's relaxing to me. So a lot of it was just that. The lettering here I did in reverse. So basically I drew all the text I wanted, and then I copied it and pasted it however many times I thought I needed it, and I went through and I erased them. So you can see like I if I go backwards, like you can see it a lot more. Like I erased one letter at a time slowly, and so instead of drawing it, I was like, oh, let me just erase it backwards, and in between each character basically you leave a frame, so it's like simulates you like picking up your pen and like writing it. And so in all of these cases, anything that had writing, you draw it backwards, so that when you play it forward it looks like you're writing it, but in reality, because otherwise like I'd never be able to like draw this perfectly every time. So it was a fun little thing that I learned. A lot of this stuff I just kind of figured out, made up as I went, how I wanted to do the story. Again, I storyboarded most of it, so it was pretty easy to do. This little, I redid this a few different times, making it look different. This character that I drew was the first like difficult animation that I ever drew, which is why it looks terrible. But basically I made, from here I made one walk cycle and then copied it over and over again. You'll see his head like pop, like it like jumps huge when the animation resets, because I just did one full walk cycle and I copied it a billion times in this app, and just like, well, I'm just gonna keep walking. And even for these scenes, I basically just kept him, like I copied him a bunch of times, added that layout as a different layer, the text, so I could scroll in the layer, I could copy and paste the layer, move it over, copy paste layer, move it over, and then the actual like bits like this that look different, I just kept the top layer, I erased my bottom layer and drew it, erased the person out of it, and then drew in whatever I wanted. So things like this trip here, like I could draw this rock coming as a different layer, and then like the actual, like from here was still standard walk cycle, and then erase his layer, and the rock was actually on this top layer, but then animate him interacting with it somewhere else. So it made it pretty simple to kind of reuse a lot of the drawings, because like I said, when it's 3200 frames, like I'm not going to draw all of those, it just takes way too long. I actually added that this kick animation was one of the last like things I did, because I wanted to add, I had to figure out which sections I wanted to add for the process, and so animation was one of the ones I threw in there at the end, because like I wanted to put it in there, but I didn't know how to show it off, so I was like, oh, I know what to do, and I just gave him some sort of character. But I got a little better at drawing people at that point, so it was a little nicer to do. This flame took me a while, but again, it's just like the person, he's there. The actual match here is a different layer, so I could copy and paste that layer over and over again, so the flame just kind of loops. I have a little twitch in the bottom stick that was a lot more apparent before, and it looked terrible, so I took it out. But I liked how this led into the lighting piece of it, which again is, I actually put it on the wrong layer. but it's on this layer with the wording so that I can, you know, add it and remove it. And I forget how long this piece is, but I basically duplicated it a couple times to make it longer, with his shadow and everything. The dots were fun to animate. Those are actually pretty simple because it's only like 10 frames. Let's jump. That again, I copied him essentially, and you can retrace or recolor different pieces with the dropper. So I just copied him, put him to a new layer, moved it over. Oops. This is all pretty straightforward on how I did it. I did it just like the text again, where I drew it for like that's I did it backwards. Oops. See all these texts. I even the graph. I drew it all complete, and then I copy paste and I erase it, which is kind of fun to do. All of these things were just kind of popping in. So, and that's essentially where we end. And the stream, I did actually, I drew it second, so I knew where I was ending on my first one, to kind of pick up with the same picture essentially. Copied it over. I already had it all storyboarded, so I knew what I wanted to do essentially. I got much better at making things move in this video, or in this animation, from doing the first one. But if this one's 7,000 frames, for a total of 10 minutes, but the actual video is 15, I think. So it's probably, 1,100, 1,200 frames, or sorry, 12,000 frames, something like that in the actual movie, or the talk. These were fun. Like the video it was pretty easy once I figured out like manipulating just objects that existed and moving them. I had more frames or more layers that I kept in here. The software's not great at letting you like pick and choose layers. So once you make a layer, it basically has to exist for the entire animation. So I just reuse layers over and over again, depending on which part of the talk I'm in. This shredder piece was really fun. I'll come back. Making these little bits here. You can see here at the beginning, I actually like shadowed them underneath, because I'm like, oh, that looks so good, and then I never did it again because it just took too long. But I really liked the like making them fly up here into the bin and making the bin kind of react. Was fun. It was just kind of like, the bin's on a different layer, copy, and with the onion effects, it's pretty easy to do. You can actually, let me drop that down to how many you see. Really only want one before, one after, sort of thing. So I could see where they were coming and where they were going, as I was drawing them, because then let you, actually put them in order. And then just added some dents to the bin, as well as like when I made them fly into the TV. Again, the onioning really helps. Like here, you can see that, before and after, I just kind of like moved each one forward and kind of went with it. And I added these little like splash effects and the little like plus or stream plus logo, which is kind of fun. This one was hard to represent. I was just trying to figure out visually like what I thought of it and why you do things certain ways. But I think it turned out okay. I wish I had more time to add like details or color to it, but it worked. This one inside of the editing software, I changed quite a bit, especially slowing down things, because in here, like those little bits flying into the TV happen really fast, but in the final video, they slow down quite a bit. I think I play them at like half speed or quarter speed. Let's go more towards the end here. This is more of the same on how that worked. Here's some of the pieces that got cut, as far as I had a whole bunch of stuff I talked about for, different file formats, but then also different features of different things and how you're playing them and different bit rates and what network you're on, all the different combinations of why you need different files. And so I kind of like was exploding that as like all this matters, but I took it all out. just to focus on, because I was like, I can't show that in the talk anyway. So it just boiled down to what does it look like on the phone. Oh, actually, this part I don't think I was in the final talk either. Or this is the part that wasn't, where I showed different networks and how it worked. If you're like casting something to a TV versus on 3G versus on Wi-Fi, you need different bits. That was the whole part that got cut. And now here I actually go into the different, essentially, components of the back end. Sign up, payments, and profiles, and then kind of like looked at what the app looks like for how it uses some of those things. These were as much generalized as possible of just like what you might need. They apply to more than just streaming apps, but obviously the talk was focused on that. I don't remember how much else I had in here. A lot of this took a while just to do, like figuring out like the animation on there, the personalization, like shortening that. Even that like took me longer than I expected, just because I wanted it to look like it wasn't rushed, and it was hard to make writing words look smooth. And then, whoops. Oh no, I went way too far back. Jump here to search. This one was kind of a key piece, just from my experience. Like search is super critical for any one of these apps, and how it interacts with the playlist service and auth and device services and your access token. All that stuff really mattered. So I was trying to show some of the importance on search, and also say some of the details around like what the like technologies you can use, whether it's Elasticsearch or Solar or something. So I was one of the few places where I actually called out some technologies, just because that like the list and text are kind of critical. And again, here I was copy and pasting this, trying to get all the timing right. In the end, for scenes I was adding, I basically would just add, I think it was like 5 frames of something that I wanted to extend, because that was enough in DaVinci to be able to chop it into a single frame, add before and after. I couldn't do it with 2 frames or 1 frame, because DaVinci, I needed at least 3 to be able to slice the middle frame out and then extend it. So I kind of learned that the hard way through syncing these files back and forth, network, my laptop, cloud, and then making it all kind of tie together. Just calling out DRM here, how you kind of wrap it. There's a lot that goes into like the DRM service itself. And then this was, obviously the final bits of how Heartbeat and some of that works, as well as, I don't remember if I talked about offline content. I think I mentioned it, but it's not in there very much. So you kind of get these heartbeats that go with your session service, DRM, and that's pretty much it. So this, again, just like the person walking earlier, this kind of like heartbeat animation, I had it on its own layer, and I just loop it over and over again. So I had like the phone on a layer, if I can find where the like blip is on its own layer, and so I just kind of like, I would draw it, erase it, work it backwards, and then flip the frames so that it would show up in the right order, because drawing it forward each time always looks sloppy. And so drawing it full and erasing backwards, and then once I had a full blip of it, I just flipped it all and then copy and pasted it over and over again to make it work, and then put all the text and then everything else on top of it. So but I think that's pretty much it. Anyone has questions, let me know on Twitter. Thank you all for watching. I hope it inspires some people to either try it themselves or at least try something different. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. So thanks again. Bye.